The AxPx podcast is brought to you by Charming Beard Coffee. Go to charmingbeard.com and enter in the code AXPX when you buy a bag of their single roasted coffees and get 10% off of your order. Charming Beard Coffee, quality small batch single origin coffee for the discerning coffee drinker. Beard not necessarily required.
Don't cry. You can rely on me, honey.
Well, welcome everyone to the AxPx podcast. I'm your host, Sean DeRager, and with me, as always, Joey Avalos.
Hey, Sean, how you doing, man?
Good, man. We're in episode 18, and
wow, 18 already, huh?
Yeah. And we took a break last week, so hopefully our listeners forgive us. We were going to try to do a live show through Google Hangouts, and I couldn't figure out that damn thing. So, and the kids were a bit. I think my 7-month-old was off track with his nap, and I called you up, Joey, and I was like, you know what? Let's just take a break this weekend. I need some R&R here.
Yeah, sometimes life gets in the way, man.
Yep, it's all good. So thanks for tuning in. Really excited about today's show. We're going to be talking to Steve Wells. He's the author of the Skeptics Annotated Bible. And he also has a book called Drunk with Blood, God's Killings in the Bible. And then we also have music from Bad Religion. So good stuff today. It's been an interesting week as far as the news goes. I think the Catholic Church, Joey, they're without a pope right now, right?
Yeah, it's the first time, in 600, 700 years or something like that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if they have like a license to sin now or what's going on. But, I'm sure...
A party up in the Vatican tonight, huh?
If you're listening and you're Catholic, let us know. I mean, is there atonement while there's no pope? I don't know. Is the line to God broken? These are actually serious questions. If you're Catholic and listening, email us and let us know. Sean, SEAN at theaxpx.com. Anything you want to talk about before we jump into our guest here, Joey? Are we?
I think we're good to go, man.
We're good, man. Cool. Well, let's jump right into our conversation here with Steve Wells. It can be argued that atheists and skeptics know the Christian Bible more than actual believers. As someone who is going through their own bout of skepticism, I can see how this can happen. My own doubts have led me to read the Bible more than I ever have. Blatant historical inaccuracies and contradictions fascinate me now, and I'm no longer scared to challenge the Word of God. Steve Wells has taken this a step further. He's actually created a resource online called the Skeptics Annotated Bible, and he's also written a book called Drunk with Blood, God's Killings in the Bible. Steve blatantly challenges the infallibility and holiness of the Bible and throws down the gauntlet, quote, "It is time for all of us to stop believing in or pretending to believe in a book that is so unworthy of belief," end quote. So we're talking to Steve Wells today. Welcome, Steve.
Hi.
Thanks so much for talking to us. When I first found out about the website, I was always curious and always wanted to chat with you, so I'm glad that it finally worked out today. And it kind of took for me to even get more interested. You actually printed the Skeptics Annotated Bible, which is insanely exciting. So you do throw down a pretty hard stance on the Bible. So I was interested. What sort of religious background do you come from?
Well, I was raised in a non-religious family. My father is agnostic, and my mother is sort of vaguely Protestant, not any particular denomination. Uh-huh. But by the time I was 12, I considered myself an atheist. It always seemed pretty obvious to me that there was no God, and that religions were just superstition. Mm-hmm. But then, and after I graduated from high school, I read the New Testament. Well, not the whole New Testament, but I read the Gospels and the Book of Acts, and I began to be attracted to the personality and the teachings, at least some of them, of Christ.
Uh-huh.
And by the time I eventually I started to get convinced myself that, maybe there's something to this. Then in college, my sister became a Catholic, and we talked a lot about religion. And before too long, I was going to mass with her, and we were having arguments all the time. And eventually, I convinced myself that I think I kind of believe this stuff, or at least I was ready to just say that. And once you get to that point, it's pretty easy to jump in. And that's what I did. I decided that, by golly, I'm a Christian, and not only that, I'm a Catholic, and heck, I want to be a Catholic priest.
Uh-huh.
So I ended up going to the seminary, but this was the 70s, and the Catholic Church was just trying to figure itself out after the Second Vatican Council. And I wasn't interested in the new church. I was a real gung ho traditionalist Catholic. I wanted the old Latin Mass and the theology of St. Thomas Aquinas. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up entering a traditionalist Catholic seminary. It was actually the one of Archbishop Lefebvre, who was, I don't know, you may have heard about it. He was excommunicated in the 70s for consecrating some priests without the Pope's approval. Oh. Anyway, I went to one of his seminaries, and then it was in the seminary where I really lost my faith. I argued with the professors in the seminary about many things, but it was particularly the existence of hell. The idea that the traditionalists have, that there is no salvation outside of the Catholic Church, was one that I just couldn't accept. That would mean that my family and friends, and pretty much everyone on earth except for the handful of traditionalist Catholics, was going to hell. So really, I ended up. I decided, well, if I had these types of problems, I had no business being a priest. I ended up leaving the seminary, and then a few years later, I married and had four kids, and they were all baptized Catholics. And I was still a Catholic, and I still attended Mass, but it was I was having problems, and I eventually, after my last child was born, we were coming back. I remember we were coming back from a camping trip, and I told my wife, Carol, I said, I don't believe this, and I'm not going to pretend like I do anymore. And so it was pretty tough on her, because she was raised a traditionalist Catholic, and we had these 4 kids that we baptized Catholics, and it was a shock to her. Well, I think she could kind of see it coming. But anyway, for about a week or so, she got out all of our catechisms and our theology books, and she was determined she was going to convince me I was wrong. And she did that. She tried pretty hard, and then after about a week, she decided she didn't believe it either.
Wow.
And she just has never really looked back. Neither of us have.
Yeah.
That's what that. And then at that point, after that happened, then I ended up. How I got into the SAB and the Skeptics and Annotated Bible was my sister became a Jehovah's Witness, the same one that was a Catholic, back when I was a teenager. She became a Jehovah's Witness, and I decided, in order to try to talk her out of this, I've got to read that darn thing. Yeah. Because they're quite biblically based, unlike Catholics. You can be a pretty good Catholic and not read the Bible. Right. But you can't. To be a Jehovah's Witness, you really they do focus on the Bible. And so I decided I better read it. So it was then that the idea of the SAB started for me, because I was just so shocked by what I read. I started highlighting the all of the different aspects of it, the absurdities, the cruelties, injustices, and that sort of thing. And by the time I got, into that process, I was thinking, how come this has never been done before? Yeah. And so I decided, well, I'll do it. And that's how the SAB came about.
Very cool. Yeah. We'll dive in a little more about the SAB in a little bit here, but I wanted to take a little bit of time, first of all, to talk about your book, Drunk with Blood, because that's actually the first is the first thing that arrived in the mail when I bought your books. The book Drunk with Blood, it's also kind of written as a resource as well, highlighting all of God's killings in the Bible. What spurred you into writing Drunk with the Blood as first, as opposed? Well, I guess you had the essay be online, but then what kind of spurred you into writing Drunk with Blood?
Yeah, that's a good question. I never really had thought about it at all until someone. I have a blog, and someone on the blog asked the question about how many people had been killed by God in the Bible. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's a good one. And so I just started with the flood in Genesis is God's first killing,
right?
And did a post on that, and then I decided, well, I'll just go on from there. And so that's what I did, and eventually wound up with 135 different killings by God. When I did a post on each one of those, and then I thought, well, this would make kind of an interesting book. So I did it.
Nice. It's nice. So it started out as kind of you're posting on your blog. Mm-hmm. What's the name of your blog?
It's got a kind of a strange name. It's called Dwindling in Unbelief.
Yes.
And the reason I chose that is that's a fairly common phrase in the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
That I thought was kind of funny. People that dwindled in unbelief in the Book of Mormon got their skins turned dark, because they were unbelievers.
Interesting.
The book is interesting. It says, what do we got here? 2,476,636 is the tally so far, right?
Yeah, and that's incomplete because I don't have the Apocrypha in there, so I'm going to do another edition of it that includes the Apocrypha because there's a lot of killings in First and Second Maccabees, for example.
Yeah, I actually have a copy of a Catholic Bible with the Apocrypha, and I've been wanting to dive into those. It's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, they are. Those books are some of them are really interesting and shocking, really. I mean, even okay, they're no worse than, say, the Book of Judges, but it's hard to beat that.
So, as far as all these all the accounts of the killings in the Drunk with Blood book, what is your do you have a favorite? It's kind of a weird question, but do you have a favorite story or one that you just, when you first found out about it, it just blew you away?
I think all of the killings in Judges are interesting. I mean, Judges is just such a bizarrely cruel set of books with there's no apparent reason. There's no moral to the stories. It's just crazy stuff that God makes people do, and it's almost always killing people. Just one set of crazy things after another. That, the Samson killings where Samson kills, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Samson and he goes out and kills 30 men for their clothes. It doesn't get much weirder than that.
There's also one, the Ammonite massacre that I'm looking at right now, which about 20,000 Ammonites were killed.
Yeah, those are actually kind of the boring ones because it's just God tells people to go out. He tells them to go out and kill everyone in a neighboring tribe, and they go do that. But that's pretty much all they say. It's the ones like the Gideon killings. The Gideon stories that I find really interesting. And then there's a whole series of mass murders that involve Jehu, who was a king in the Old Testament, and God was really mad at Ahab, and he was mad at Israelite king, and he was mad at him because he didn't kill a captured king. He killed everybody else, but he didn't kill the captured king, and God never forgave him for it. And so he decided, I'm just going to kill all of your offspring like forever. And so Jehu was out on a mission from God to kill all of the descendants of King Ahab.
Wow.
And it ends up having things like getting 70 heads in 2 baskets, saying, I want 70 heads of these family and friends of King Ahab and descendants. And so they delivered them all to Jehu. It's stories like that, just crazy things.
Yeah, you don't hear these stories in Sunday school for sure.
No.
One that I've actually known about when I first heard about it, it was really shocking to me, is the story of Jephthah's daughter.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. Can you explain, set that one up a little bit?
Well, yeah, it's a pretty simple story. Jephthah is one of the judges in the book of Judges, and he makes a promise to God. He says, if you'll help me massacre all these people, then I will sacrifice to you whatever comes through my door when I return. I don't know what he was expecting, his wife or his dog or what, but it ended up that his daughter was the one that came out to greet him when he came back from the slaughter. And so, he's just kind of stuck, made a promise to God. So he had to do it. And she said, yeah, well, that's right. You do have to do that. So I'm okay with that. But, let me go up with my friends up on the mountain for a while. And then when I come back, you can do it. And he did. Wow. And that's the end of the story.
Wow. And for those of you listening, that's Judges 11:39. So, it's Judges 11, but the verse 39 is, and her father did with her according to his vow, which he had vowed. So,
yeah.
Crazy.
But this is the Old Testament. Come on, guys. Right?
Right. Yeah. And it's true. The Old Testament is quite different than the New.
Uh-huh.
And in many ways, it's much, much worse. But the New Testament, in some ways, is worse than the Old, in that the New Testament invents hell. And you can't get much worse than hell. Much crueler than the idea that you're going to torture someone forever for something as silly as not believing something that there's no evidence for.
Right. How you have a lot of you have it open on your website for Christians to come back and and converse with you about what you're writing about and everything. And the God of the New Testament, like we said, does seem completely different than the God of the Old Testament. What are the kind of the most prevalent explanations you've had Christians give you for this reason?
Well, they look at the Old Testament as being just in preparation for the New. That everything in the Old Testament, they say, points to Christ. Of course, that's the way they view it. It's kind of silly because there's so much in it that obviously doesn't point to anything. Certainly not to Jesus. But they look at all of the laws and all that. That was the preparation of the Israeli people, a way to preserve them so that out of them could come Jesus. And whatever you have to do to get to Jesus is okay. Right,
like it's the old covenant with God, and then Jesus after Jesus is the new covenant. Is how I've heard it explained.
Yeah, and most Christians, of course, don't believe that any of the, apart from the Ten Commandments, should be any of the laws in the Old Testament should be followed today. But there are exceptions. In fact, in my hometown of Moscow, Idaho, there's a pastor there that has quite a large following, and people come from all over the world to attend his schools, and he believes in applying the Old Testament just as it's written there.
Wow.
Except for in the cases where it's explicitly changed in the New, which isn't very many cases.
So he's okay with killing gays?
Yes, he is. He's okay with killing gays.
Wow.
He's okay with slavery. In fact, he's written a book called Southern Slavery as It Was, that defends the slavery of the South before the Civil War.
Oh my gosh.
This guy's name, by the way, is Doug Wilson, and he's a pretty prominent figure among the evangelicals, the Reconstructionists, or they have various names that they call themselves. But it's becoming a larger and larger part of Protestant Christianity. And the more mainstream, the nicer, more mainstream Christian groups are really dwindling, and it's these guys like Doug Wilson's group that are thriving.
Wow, I'm writing down his name so I can look at it and my head can explode later. I've had a bad habit lately of looking up pastors like this, and just getting more and more frustrated.
you'll find a lot about him online. He's got a lot of writings. He's got a very interesting blog. I love to go to this blog and participate there.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and go into our first break here. Excited about this week's band, and I figured it would be a good fit for the show. Bad Religion had a new album come out in January, and it's awesome. It's called True North. The first song I'm going to play for you right now is called In Their Hearts Is Right, and you're listening to the AxPx podcast. We'll be talking to Steve Wells right after this.
There's something pathetic in the world today, and I don't know how it all began. As if all the shame and punishment will finally make me understand. A word means nothing, one in action, but actions are valuable as deeds. And no one can dog it for a lifetime, unless it only makes you believe. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows now. Everybody knows. Everybody knows what's in their heart is right. I'm just a termite on an anthill. I think about it every single day. A senseless being like an inspiration, just waiting to be blown away. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows now. Everybody knows. Everybody knows what's in their heart is
That was Bad Religion with the song In Their Hearts Is Right off of their new album, True North, which is out right now. You can get it on iTunes. You can get it on Amazon MP3, I think for $5, which is a steal. You can also get it on vinyl, which I should have done, but it was either $20 or $5, and I went with the $5 one. So, good stuff. Great album. We'll be hearing more from them a little bit later, but we'll jump right back in here with our conversation with Steve Wells. He's the author of Drunk with Blood, God's Killings in the Bible, and also the Skeptics Annotated Bible. All right, so, we already covered when you had the idea for creating the Bible, but I wanted, my question is, like this had to have been, a massive undertaking. When did you start creating the Skeptics Annotated Bible, and then have there been instances where you've just been overwhelmed with the whole thing?
Oh yeah, I mean it's an overwhelming thing from the beginning and still is now. It's just way more than one person can adequately deal with. Even if you're spending full time on it, which I haven't been. Uh-huh. I mean, I'm starting to spend more time with it now because I'm more or less retired. But when I started, of course, I had 4 little kids and a family and a job, and so I couldn't work on it full time. But yeah, it's something that when I started just highlighting it, color coding it, and I would transfer all of my notes onto little cards, little index cards, uh-huh. and with the contradictions and all the other categories. And then eventually, when the internet came along, then I knew that it would work there. So I created the website in 99. It's about 89 when I started. So there's about a 10-year process there where I was doing it more or less by hand, and then converted it to the internet. And I always had in mind, I always hoped that I'd get it out in book form, but and finally was able to do that this year. But as far as being overwhelming, it definitely it didn't really feel that way when I started. It was just like, whoa, this is it seemed very natural. And it also was sort of a project that I started on my own for my own use. With, at the back of my mind, it was kind of like, okay, I'd like to do this as a book someday. But even if I didn't do that, it would be just useful to me. As I say, I was using it kind of as a means to talk my sister out of becoming a Jehovah's Witness. So it was kind of a practical thing as well. And then once you commit yourself, especially once the website was up, then you kind of keeps you at it, where you can't just say, oh well, it was a good idea, but there's other stuff to do.
Yeah, so it kind of took on a life of its own.
Yeah, it did.
Do you have it? Does anyone else help you with the website now?
Yeah, well, I think the website I'm hoping that there is someone who is redoing the website for me, and I'm hoping that we'll have that out later in the year. It will be making it a database-driven site rather than just the clunky old HTML stuff that I do. That will help a lot because I won't have all of the the issues that you have when you're trying to do your own HTML.
Right.
It's pretty awkward, and to add something like to add a contradiction, and it takes a lot of time because there's so many different links that have to be changed and whatnot. So it would be great when that happens, but I'm still doing it mostly by my own, on my own. Although it's sort of become a family thing. My son Philip is. The son that was a baby that was 6 months old when we were returning on the camping trip, and he had just been baptized Catholic, and he's the son that son that I mentioned on the camping trip thing. And when I decided I was no longer a Catholic and started this process, and he's now doing the Book of Mormon. I did the Book of Mormon. I added the Book of Mormon, but I did it in a very, very quickly, not at all a thorough. Hadn't done a thorough job on it. So he's starting it now and going back through it and blogging it on the Post, and then we are kind of redoing the Book of Mormon as he goes along, and eventually we hope to publish the Book of Mormon in the Skeptics Annotated Book of Mormon in book form. Eventually, I say we're hoping within a year or so.
Yeah.
Wow.
Joey, did you have any questions for Steve as we're going along here?
Well, yeah, actually, I'm a little curious. You keep on bringing up your sister, and it was one of the main reasons why you started this. So, were you successful with your sister? Did she continue being a Jehovah's Witness, or did she deconvert?
Oh no, she's still at it. She's still with it, and she's very gung ho. She spends all of her time, literally all of her time. I mean. Going door to door, trying to convert people and doing Bible studies. Yeah, she's really into it. And not only that, I have a son that is a Jehovah's Witness. Crying out loud. Yeah.
That's very interesting. It's funny because last night my wife and I came home and we had they had a watchtower thing just like shoved through the door, and she got kind of upset. She's like, instead of just leaving it on the porch or something, they actually shoved it into our house. And it's very interesting because Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe that Jesus is. I don't know if they don't really believe he's divine, or they don't really preach the resurrection. He's more of a prophet, I guess. When I was doing some reading, and he used to be the Archangel Michael. And
exactly. Still is. I think it's a little bit confusing.
And they actually have their own version of the Bible. So I was going to ask you earlier, because you said you started reading the Bible. Did you read their Watchtower approved Bible, or was it mainly the King James version?
No, I didn't read theirs, and I did actually read the King James version. I'm not sure why I did that, but I did. I just kind of happened to start reading the King James version, and then when I did the website, I stuck with it. Partly because the King James is, in the public domain, whereas some of the more modern translations are. And partly because there are some Christians that, like Mormons, for example, that consider it to be the only valid, the King James only crowd. There's a lot of evangelicals are that way. Although there's a lot that like the New International Version as well.
But no one believes in unicorns, and they're in the King James version.
And dragons.
Yeah. Yeah, as far as I know, none of those fascinating creatures in the Bible, mythical creatures, are believed to exist today. Although sometimes they have ideas of what they have explanations. Let's say.
Yeah. We actually featured a lecture by Bart Ehrman about the King James Bible, and he was saying that they were trying to translate words. I guess it was to be Old Testament, so in Hebrew, that they didn't really have a parallel with animals. They didn't really know what animal was being mentioned, so they just kind of threw in, and since they were kind of in a mythical context, they just kind of threw in the mythical animals of the day. So that's why you would see like unicorns and dragons, and in newer translations, I guess they leave those out, and I haven't really done a check, Joey. Did they mention just four-legged creatures, or do they just make up like an ox or something?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure actually. Yeah.
Darn it! Now I gotta research something else. But
well, we were talking about the Jehovah's Witness too. I have my own story I would like to share too, because I have some family members that are Jehovah's Witness, and I have a conspiracy about it because my last name is Avalos, and it's Hispanic descent. So I get from time to time Jehovah's Witness knock my door, and I don't answer the door, but they leave me pamphlets in Spanish. Only in Spanish, not English and Spanish, just Spanish. And I feel like I'm being targeted. It's like, first you're assuming I speak Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I speak English. I don't, I have, my parents can speak Spanish, but I can't. So I just find it funny, man. It's like they're really gung ho, in one sense, you're like, wow, they really truly believe this, and you kind of sympathize with them. Like they really think they're trying to do something good. But at the same time, you're like, do you understand what you're doing here? It's kind of creeping me out,
Yeah. You kind of have to. I do admire them in that way, in that they are willing to. I mean, I think they are doing it because they're trying to help you. They're trying to. They're trying to prevent you from being destroyed when Armageddon comes, which is coming soon. It's always coming soon.
You're right, of course.
Yeah. So they're doing it out of the kindness of their heart, and I appreciate that. Whereas a lot of other Christians, at least the Jehovah's Witnesses, don't believe in hell. I like that.
When you're dead, and if you're not a believer, you're just dead.
Yeah, that's right, which is nice. And so I think that what my sister and my son are hoping, sort of secretly, they probably wouldn't admit it even to themselves, is that I will die a natural death before I'm killed by God at Armageddon. Because if you're killed at Armageddon, it's going to be messy, painful, and prolonged. It's not going to be good. But if you just die a natural death, have a heart attack or whatever, then that's the way to go. If they're right, then you definitely want to die a natural death before Armageddon.
Uh-huh.
And then you're just dead. But I appreciate that they're trying to save you from that. And it bothers me that I have another sister who just recently became a evangelical Christian. And she'd always been a non-believer up until the last few years, but now she's an evangelical. And she will not talk about religion with me at all. And yet I assume, I don't know, but I assume that she believes, like most other evangelicals do, that I'm going to go to hell when I die, and it's going to be awful. I'm going to be tortured forever. And you'd think that she would care enough about me to try to convince me of the truth of Christianity.
Right. Does she feel like she's not qualified? I mean, I guess we're skeptical, we're kind of trying to pinpoint, what she's thinking.
Sure, I think that's probably it. I mean, I think that she feels like it's she's not going to be able to do it. She can pray for me, and she'll just leave it up to God. And
right.
And then I think most people also think that, well, God's not going to send my brother or my dad or whoever, my children, to hell.
Yeah.
It's those other people that hell.
Yeah. Hell is an interesting subject, and it's funny because we're hopefully in the near future we'll be having Jay Baker on the show, and he's a son of Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, and he wrote a book called Faith faith, doubt, and other lines I've crossed. And he argues that, there really, if you look at the Bible, there really is no hell. I'm halfway through the book, so I haven't finished, but it's interesting that there's a lot of new Christians or preachers that, they're pissing off a lot of other Christians and pastors too, but coming out and is it Rob Bell as well?
Yeah, Rob Bell.
He actually had to leave his church and everything, cause he wrote a book called Love Wins. And so they're preaching more along the lines of, what Jesus taught as far as grace and love. And they argue that there's no hell too. So it's an interesting subject that's kind of coming to the forefront recently, and even in Christian circles where people are questioning that existence. What kind of, really, if God is love, what kind of a God would send someone to be tormented horribly, for the rest of their lives? It's just it's a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, and I think that there's that the Bible itself is not clear at all about hell. That you can make a good. It isn't clear about much of anything really, but you can make a good case on each side of the existence and nature of hell.
Yeah,
a biblically based argument.
Right.
I
see this question a lot, and this was actually on your FAQ on your website. But Steve, what qualifies you to create your own commentary on the Bible?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Do you have, because I had a Facebook conversation the other day where I don't trust people with doctor in front of their names if they're not an actual medical doctor, and where another one of my friends, acquaintances, argues that you need to have a doctorate to actually, in theology, to actually understand the Bible and everything like that. So of course people are going to ask you, Steve, what's your qualifications?
Yeah, they are, and I don't really have any special qualification. I'm just a guy who read the Bible and was shocked by what he read. I'm really writing the what I did with the SAB was just tried to present the Bible, or tried to highlight the things that would be of interest to somebody who is just trying to objectively evaluate the Bible. Is the Bible a good book? Does it have any cruelties in it? What does it have to say about science and history? Are there any contradictions? Is it something I should base my life upon? That's what I'm trying to. If an objective reader that had never even heard of the Bible before picked it up and started to read it, I would just like to kind of point out some things that they might be interested in, they might want to think about. Uh-huh. And if they don't agree with me, well, that's great. Sometimes I don't agree with myself. Sometimes when there are things that I have highlighted in there that I shouldn't have said that. So some of the things are kind of marginal and nitpicky. I try to be comprehensive, and so you end up having troubles at the margins deciding what to leave in or what to throw out. And I tend to try to mark it if it would be of interest, and let the reader decide whether they agree with how it's marked or not. But as far as my actual qualifications, I don't have any special. I've always been interested in religion, and I think I've probably studied it more than most. But I don't think that anyone needs any special qualifications to try to read and understand the Bible.
Right.
So, if it's the case that only those who have advanced studies and advanced degrees in ancient history and the Hebrew and no Hebrew and Greek and whatnot can make sense out of the Bible, then what the heck good is it?
And they'll be the only ones that make it to heaven.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess that would be true, because they're the only ones that can read and understand and explain the meaning of the Bible, or know the meaning of the Bible. Uh-huh. And I don't think that's true. When in Exodus 22:18 says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," that's pretty clear. That means kill witches.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, even if you got all those doctors and into one room, they'd still disagree on their theology, and
Oh, absolutely.
So I mean that there's a problem with that too. So.
Yeah, and that's just to show what a poorly written book the Bible is. I mean, it's really atrocious in terms of. I don't mean poorly written. Some of it's beautiful. Some of it's very profound. There's some great stuff in the Bible, and I do include the good stuff in the Bible as well in one of my categories, and try to point them out whenever I can. But it's a Bible that's written over many centuries by many different people, and it's just natural that and in times that were pretty primitive from the human history standpoint. And so it's not surprising that there are things that we find to be both ridiculous and immoral that in the Bible. It would be strange if it wasn't otherwise.
Yeah.
But if it really was inspired by a kind and loving God, then it certainly isn't what you would expect to. This is not the book that you would expect to have been written by a kind and loving God.
Yeah. Well, we'll dive into this a little bit more. I'm going to take one more musical break here, and we'll come back and chat a little bit more about the Skeptics Annotated Bible with Steve Wells. The song I'm going to play for right now is called Department of False Hope. This is Bad Religion on the AxPx podcast.
Welcome, my son, to where the work is never done, and the hungry are seldom ever fed. The Department of False Hope is a proving ground for dopes, and they'll grind your tiny bones to make their bread. So hold your head up high, forgotten man. Tomorrow won't be made for you, and everybody's gotta try to lend a helping hand. Forgotten man, there's nothing more to do. It crackled on the radio through bright plumes of the sun. The announcer said the age of faith was dead, though the adolescent nation was just looking for salvation. The beast of reason reared its ugly head. So hold your head up high, forgotten man. Tomorrow's not for me and you, and everybody's gotta try to lend a helping hand. Forgotten man, there's nothing more to do.
That was Bad Religion with the song Department of False Hope off of their new album, True North, which I highly recommend. If you're a fan of Bad Religion, I think it's one of their strongest albums in years. And a lot of good, profound stuff in their lyrics, too. I really love their lyrics. They're kind of everyone just thinks that a punk rock band is just kind of a sloppy, who cares type band. But I've always appreciated the thought that Bad Religion puts into their lyrics. And actually, I believe that their lead singer is a professor at a college somewhere. I should have looked that up, but I would love to have him on the show. Shoot. Joey, use your music contacts.
I'll make that happen, man.
All right, man. All right, we are talking to Steve Wells, of course, the author of Drunk with Blood and of the Skeptics Annotated Bible. You mentioned all the categories in the Bible here, which I have right in front of me. Could you go through the categories you set up, or some of your favorite categories? I know it's a laundry list here.
Yeah, it is, and it kind of gets longer as I go. When I first started, I think I only had 4.
Yeah.
Cruelty, misogyny. I guess there's more than that, because I know I had sex and homosexuality. Science. I had science and nature, science and history. That is. And contradictions, of course. So I guess I had more than that, but it has expanded over time as I went along. As far as favorites go, I guess I would say that the one that I think is the most important is probably cruelty. That it's the cruelty in the Bible more than any of the other categories or aspects that would trouble me the most as a believer. And it always did whenever I would read it, and I would read about God burning people to death because they're complaining about the lack of food and water during the Exodus. You just go, well, that just can't be. I mean, the God that I believe just could never do such a thing. So I would say that the cruelty is the thing that I think is the most important category, and of course, cruelty, intolerance, and injustice are oftentimes they're pretty tightly linked.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people, even churches today, that use certain verses in the Bible to kind of get their point across, or their racism, and even right now today with the everyone's trying to use the Bible to kind of condemn homosexuals, and the whole gay marriage debate is on the forefront right now. And that was actually, honestly, one of the things that started my major doubts and to start searching this Bible more, is because I couldn't get behind, these churches that were preaching that, homosexuals deserve death, and that, it's not my place to tell somebody that their sexual urges or how they're wired was, right or wrong or whatever, So that was kind of a catalyst for me to actually start digging into the Bible more and learning more about this. And here I am now, the downward spiral keeps on going.
Yeah, I would say that homosexuality, there's probably more interest in that. That probably more people come to the site looking for information on homosexuality in the Bible than maybe anything else. And it's kind of strange because there's relatively little in the Bible about homosexuality.
It's only about 20, I think 25 mentions.
Yeah, I think I've kind of expanded that a bit since the book has come out.
Okay.
I think there's more than that now that I'm including, although some of them are kind of a stretch. But there's not much. It's just a handful.
Yeah.
Of course, some of them are pretty strong, and some of them are pretty definite.
Yeah, definitely, and that's one of the things that why I'm excited to talk to Jay Baker about, is because he says, if you go back to the original language, they're actually not necessarily talking about what we think of as homosexuality today, and actually that word came about is a recent word. It's not even when the Bible was written.
The late 1800s or so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm a little bit skeptical of that because that's sort of the way that believers get around everything in the Bible. Is that that's what it says, but that's not what it means. That's not what it meant then anyway. But I think that homosexuality at the time that the Bible was written was not viewed very favorably anywhere. They're not anywhere. There are some cultures in which it was, but I don't think it was in that part of the world, and at that time. And so I don't find it at all surprising that you would have things like it says in Leviticus 20:13. If a man has sex with another man, like he's having sex with a woman, you stone him to death. Their blood shall be upon him. I think it's pretty clear that's what they're talking about. That's what they mean. And if you're okay with that, then the Bible's your book. But if you're not, then you should really be going someplace else. And it really bothers me that a lot of people that I know that are liberal Christians are very much pro-gay. And I think that's great. I commend them for that. But they're also pretend that they're basing their lives upon a book. It's the only book I know of. I mean, the Quran doesn't say it. Book of Mormon doesn't say it. There's no other book that I know of that tells you, that commands you to kill homosexuals.
Uh-huh. Leviticus is interesting. I had kind of a theory about Leviticus, and we'll see what you think, Steve, that, like you said that, quote unquote, God was trying to keep the bloodline of the Israelites pure, and so, and if Leviticus was written back when the Jews were kind of wandering, right? They were kind of a nomadic tribe trying to keep the bloodline pure. If you read a lot of like the Levitical laws, it kind of makes sense if you're going to be keeping, the bloodline pure. Of course, you wouldn't want homosexuality because that's not contributing to, expanding the tribe or anything like that. You don't want sickness in the tribe. So of course, if a woman is on her period, she's unclean and has to go outside the camp, I guess. What are your thoughts on that kind of theory? Like this was kind of law created for them at that time, using God as kind of the overseer, kind of a scare tactic into keeping everyone in line. Does that make sense to you, or am I way off base?
No, I think that's right. But the thing that stands out to me in the Bible and also in the Quran, and the Book of Mormon too, is that God is very much prefers some people over others.
Uh-huh.
He has his favorite people, the Jews, or the Mormons, or the Muslims, and everyone else, is just out of luck. They're enemies, and they're to be, you can, in some cases, you're commanded to kill them, but generally speaking, God shows no concern about them, and doesn't seem to think that you should be concerned about them either. He has his favorite people, and he has his favorite religious beliefs, and you had better toe the line with regard to those. You can summarize the Quran with just a few words, and it's repeated over and over and over again in the Quran. And for the unbelievers, God has prepared a painful doom. That line is, in a very short book, is repeated more than 100 times in the Quran. It just happens all over the place. And the same idea, it's not quite as explicit, is in the Bible as well. And I think that's his preference for the Jewish people, trying to keep the Jewish, prevent intermarriage, for example, is one of the things, homosexuality maybe is another, but one of the things that really upsets the God of the Old Testament is whenever someone would try to intermarry with another tribe, and it's really another religion. It's what really got him upset with. So yeah, I think you're right. Trying to preserve the purity of the Israelites and their religion is a main focus in the Old Testament.
Yeah, that's very fascinating, and I'm taking an online Yale course about the Old Testament, so I've just scratched the surface. And it's by Christine Hayes, I think. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah,
stuff. I think I might have actually started to watch to do that as well. I think I dropped out, but
it's all available online. You don't have to. You don't even have to register. And what I did was
that's what I meant. Yeah. I think I was watching it online.
I downloaded all the MP3s, put them all on iTunes, and they're all on a playlist. So I'm kind of working through the playlist. So
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. I also grabbed a couple books that they recommended. One is a lot, I can't remember the name of it, but it's definitely, it's an older book, and I think a lot of people, like scholars, have kind of discounted some of it, but it's basically paralleling a lot of, ancient myths and fables and showing where they come into the creation story and stuff like that. So it's, very fascinating stuff. And that's the thing, like in the past, I'd never questioned the Bible. I just figured, oh, that's God's word. And that's pretty much it. And I never was, allowed to question it, allowed to go further, and, wasn't allowed to go towards, I guess it wasn't allowed. It wasn't suggested that I go towards any other book written other than like a Christian scholar or something like that. So once you kind of open Pandora's box with learning about how the Bible was created, it's just fascinating how it does open up just a whole new world to someone like me who's just gets, once I get fascinated with something, I get hooked on it, and I can't just ignore it. I can't go back to just being, an ignorant Christian. Some people don't like that term, but I don't mean that as like a dig on somebody. I just think it is easier to just ignore, all this other stuff and just focus on the Bible. But I think once you open yourself up to it, it's hard to go back to that, which I'm finding. Yeah. So, speaking of Christians, you've obviously have gotten a lot of reaction from the Christian community. What are the sort of the kind of the top reactions you receive from Christians through the website? And I'm sure it's going to happen more once people actually, if I have this book out on a coffee table and I got friends over, I'm positive it's going to ruffle some feathers.
Yeah, I'm really surprised at the reaction that I've got from Christians, because most of it has been, I won't say positive, but it's been respectful and polite. Some of it's been a little bit preachy, but I haven't gotten too many angry or threatening type responses. And some of the responses have been very good. In fact, I try to post the responses that I have that people have given me from other websites. For example, it's from Christian websites at the bottom of the pages at the SAB. And some of them are very good. They're pretty thorough. But yeah, I haven't had a lot of hate mail or that sort of thing. I'm kind of pleased with that. And as far as with the Book of Mormon and Muslims, I just haven't got much response at all. Okay. I don't really know what to think about that.
Yeah. What, speaking of the Quran and the Book of Mormon, I don't know how deep you are into those, but what did they present any sort of like different challenges than, looking into the Christian Bible, or was it pretty much the same sort of issues?
Yeah, I think they each present their own special difficulties. The Quran in particular, you really need to know the Sunnah. You need to, in order to interpret or make sense of the Quran, or at least Muslim belief.
Okay. And you also, sorry to interrupt. Oh, what is the Sunnah?
It's the sayings of Muhammad, okay. Sayings and acts of Muhammad, and that is placed almost as much emphasis is placed on that as in the Quran itself. So to do a good job with the Quran requires quite a bit of research into the life and teachings and the sayings of Muhammad in the Sunnah. So there's, and also the order in which they were revealed to Muhammad is very important, because they believe in abrogation, where what might be revealed in an earlier chapter of the Quran might later on be abrogated or changed in a later revelation to Muhammad. And the order that they have, the order that the Quran is usually given in has nothing to do with the actual order that they were revealed in. So the long ones are in the beginning, and then they get shorter as they go along. Right? So it's really in length of the chapter rather than in the time that it was revealed, and that's what's important really to Muslims.
Interesting. What about the Book of Mormon?
The Book of Mormon is in some ways a lot more fun to do than than the Bible or the Quran. The Quran is the other thing about the Quran is it's both incoherent and not incoherent, but it's just various repetitive short sayings or sentences that are not really very closely related to one another, just kind of one after the other, and then they might be repeated a dozen times throughout the Quran or dozens of times throughout the Quran, but they're not presented in any clear way. So there's no real theme to any one chapter. They're just kind of various little sayings piled on, one after the other. So it's a difficult book to read, and it's a difficult book to highlight, or at least to blog, for example. It's difficult to make a story out of it. Whereas in the Book of Mormon, you can definitely make a story out of it. That's all it is a story, and a crazy story at that. And so it's a lot of fun to highlight and to try to actually understand what the Book of Mormon is saying, because the more you understand what the Book of Mormon is saying, then the crazier it gets. So it's fun. The Book of Mormon is I think the most fun in terms of trying to explain what the Book of Mormon is saying. It's written, and part of it is just the way that it's written. It's so obviously written and trying to sound like the King James version, and in doing so, Joseph Smith just got way carried away.
Yeah, I've tried reading it, and it definitely it does. Even if you read it out loud, it just sounds like a pale imitation of the King James.
Yeah, it is.
Joey, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. This is interesting stuff, man. I'm learning a lot here.
Anything that comes to mind as far as expanding on any questions, or?
Well, I just think when you're battling, like, it's one thing to battle not rebuke the Christian Bible or even the Mormon Bible, but when you do the Quran, is there any hesitation going there, with recent events, outcries with, like, even that, what was that one movie, the little trailer thing, Sean, that came out, the Up in Arms everyone went, about depicting Muhammad?
Oh, yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, people went crazy on.
Anyways, it doesn't matter, but just stuff like that, when you're tackling, religious texts like this, is there any fear involved? Or do you try to keep kind of low-key and, I don't know, get your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there is. I had some concern when I first did the Quran a few years ago. When I first created the Skeptics Annotated Quran and started to annotate that, I was a bit concerned about that, because there's, I was afraid that there might be some danger involved with that. In terms of doing the Skeptics Annotated Quran in book form, I think that might be something that might, maybe you can get by with a website that nobody really notices, but I don't know, a book might be a more dangerous thing. And religions are not all alike. You often hear that they're all pretty much the same and all that, but they're not. There are some religions that you can kind of tell how bad a religion is by how bad its fundamentalists are. If you're a fundamentalist Jain, then what you end up doing is wearing a mask so that you won't inhale a bug, possibly inhale a bug, or right. A fundamentalist Jain is no threat to anyone, not even a bug. But a fundamentalist Muslim is, and there's reasons for that. The reasons that go all the way back to the teachings of their prophet and the writing, and of their holy book. And that's the same is true of the Bible. But for some reason, most Christians have been able to, over the centuries, they've been able to find some way out, really, of following their own book's teachings. Mostly by ignoring, but sometimes by clever interpretation or rationalization, but somehow they've managed to get over and beyond stoning people to death. And it's crazy because stoning that's God's favorite way of killing people. I mean, there's no question about that. Yeah. Sometimes he likes burning people to death. Sometimes he likes stoning. Sometimes he buries people alive. But stoning is his favorite way to go, and that's what he commands people to do, is to stone people to death. Well, nobody does that anymore. And I don't know why, because I would think it would really piss God off. But.
Well, with Christianity, I can see it not the fundamental and not going that extreme with Christianity, because you had Jesus, telling who's without sin cast the first stone. So you have the stories of Jesus kind of condemning that sort of activity and saying that the old law,
your neighbor.
Old law has been passed away. But I'm actually shocked we haven't seen fundamental fundamental Judaism, because that's where all the stoning and killing comes into place. Is the Jewish religion, because they don't believe that Jesus Christ was the Messiah.
Yeah, you're right. That is kind of mysterious. I mean, there is some fundamentalist Jews, and they do make life difficult for women, and I'm sure they do for homosexuals as well. But they don't stone people to death. I've never heard of that. Whereas they still do, and the part of the world where this is done is Islamic countries, and there's nothing in the Quran about stoning people to death.
But I saw some news story where someone in a Muslim country or Islamic country, I don't even know how to pronounce, which one to use, Islamic country, where women were getting stoned to death.
Oh yeah, it happens. It still happens in Iran. It still happens. I think it's fairly common in the Islamic world.
But the Quran
the Quran does not say to stone to death. At least, not that I haven't been able to find it. If anybody if anyone can find a verse in the Quran that requires stoning or suggests stoning, or even that stoning is mentioned, I'd like to hear about it. But I've never been able to find it. But it is in the Sunnah, and that's the problem. Is that Muhammad approved of executing people in that way.
Okay.
And so that's where that comes from in the Muslim world.
Fascinating.
And whereas Jesus, as you say, of course, that particular story apparently was not in the Gospel of John in the earliest manuscripts. It was added later, apparently. But that doesn't matter. It's a part of the Bible now, and Christians can point to it as a reason for not following the Old Testament laws for stoning.
Great stuff. I'm really glad these books are available, and even if I think that even Christians can find a lot of interesting things out of these books, I can see these as reference tools and things that Christians shouldn't necessarily be afraid of either. I never know what to classify myself anymore, but the more and more I class myself as possibly Christian agnostic. I don't know. But I hate labels. I find I'm just a person, searching for truth, truth seeker, I guess would be the best thing to classify myself as. But I'm glad that I have these as tools to look through, when I'm actually looking in the Bible and I want to see, well, I wonder what the Skeptics Annotated says, about this verse I'm reading. So I'm glad that it's in book form for people to check out. Has it been received well as far as the book?
Well, it's kind of early. We just got the copies from the printer in the last few weeks. So, got all of our pre-orders out. I think yesterday we finally got them all. But I think it's going pretty well. But right now I don't think too many people know about it. You pretty much have to get it from our website. Yeah. It is available now at Amazon, but mostly it's being, people are going there from our website. So we'll see.
I mean, I was like, when I saw it was available in book form, I nerded out. I was like, I was incredibly excited to see this. It was in a book. So there's got to be other people like me, right? They're just ecstatic about it.
Yeah, well, I think that when I first thought of this, I knew it was something that would be that would work, that people would want to have. It was obvious to me that there are hundreds of different Bibles, annotated Bibles out there, but there's nothing that's presented from a non-believer's point of view. And so I know there's a lot of interest in the Bible, always has been, and there is, I think, especially today. So since it's the only one that is presented from a non-believer's point of view, I think that it will appeal to a lot of people. I hope it will.
Are you kind of dreading any future revisions of the book? Because you're constantly updating the website. Is that something you have in the back of your mind? Like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to update this print. Oh no, the print form.
I already have revisions in mind.
Yeah.
there'll be corrections to make, I'm sure. And I'm going to add the Apocrypha. And I'm going to make quite a few changes. And we already have plans for adding additional books. I'm going to have a book on the contradictions.
Okay.
Because contradictions can't be handled decently in the book form. They're just listed at the end of the book.
Yeah.
But you really need a separate page for each contradiction and where you can discuss it and present the verses, the actual verses, rather than just giving the chapter and verse reference.
Nice.
So I'll do that, and we'll I think I mentioned that we'll be doing the Skeptics Annotated Book of Mormon, and maybe the Skeptics Annotated Quran. You never know.
see how brave you are when that comes.
Yeah, that's right.
Comes along.
Can I ask you two a question?
Sure. Yeah.
I was just wondering whether you, Sean, you say that you are a Christian agnostic, or that would be about as close as you can come.
I guess for me right now, because like I find that the Christ teachings of grace and love are very profound. And, that's what I identify with most of that part of the New Testament.
Yeah.
Loving your neighbor. I love the fact that he met with prostitutes. He met with sinners. And it's unfortunate that most Christians today don't seem to identify with the Jesus, because if you look at everything that Jesus said, pretty much everything, he did say, I come with a sword, but I'm not sure exactly what he was referring to.
Yeah, there is a dark side.
There's a little bit of a dark side to Jesus, but for the most part, he's teaching unconditional love, and that's why I feel like a lot of Christians miss the boat, and they look at everything else, and they're quicker to judge somebody than they are to actually love them unconditionally. So that's why I'd say I would consider myself like a Christian agnostic, because I feel like there are some profound things in the New Testament. Old Testament, I'm not so sure about. And as far as, how we got here, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure we will ever know, and I'm not sure anyone will ever know. But, but I'm all about keeping myself open to learn. And the problem is people say, they get quote unquote saved, and they go all gung ho, for Jesus, and they stop learning. All they learn is the Bible, and they have their blinders on to anything else going on in science and philosophy and anything else outside of that. And they base everything around the Bible, which I think is kind of the wrong idea to have. I feel like if you're seeking truth, you should be open to, any form of truth that is out there, and learn and grow. And, life's a journey, a constant journey. So why end at a conclusion so early in your life, So that's kind of how I explain it,
How about you, Joey? I think
what Sean's saying is right on the money. I've always kind of lived by these two things. Like I like to stay away from arrogance and ignorance. If you have both of those, you end up in a bad spot. When you have absolute truth and you're claiming that you are, I feel like you might be off the boat a little bit. So I think Sean and I are, that's what Sean and I started this podcast, is that we enjoy listening to people's journeys, including ours. We might come from different places, different culturally, but we're all on the same journey. And I think what Sean and I think is just, it's more about the message of love, loving people, and then having good conversation, because that's what's missing in this world. No one can even talk about this. It's always about right and wrong. What do you believe, what you don't believe? And more than anything, we're more interested in the conversation with people, with humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I agree with you both. There's an awful lot of good in the teaching of Jesus, and that's really why I ended up becoming Christian for a while.
Right.
Was that I did admire some, and I still do. I mean, I really haven't changed in my view of Jesus and his ideas. I still admire. Well, I admire many of them. Some of them, of course, I don't. And
right.
That's the problem, is that, but you don't really know. It's very difficult to know what Jesus actually said or did.
Right.
I do think that I agree with Bart Ehrman that that we can be nearly certain that there was such a person, that there was a Jesus of Nazareth that taught some things and caused some trouble and ended up getting crucified by the Romans. and we probably even can figure out a few more details here and there of his life and some of the things that he might have said. But it's hard to know just what. But the teachings in the things that are attributed to him and the sayings that are attributed to him in the Gospels, some of them are really amazing for the time that they're coming from.
All right. Well, Steve, I want to thank you so much for talking with us about the things you're doing. And I want to thank you for the things you're doing. It's like nobody had, I think that your books are a valuable tool. And it's one of those things you didn't have to do it and you did it. So, and personally, thank you for creating these.
Oh, you're welcome.
Spending the time, and I hope that you are duly rewarded for all your time.
Yeah.
So I'm all about pushing the books here. I think they're valuable. Steve, where can people go to find the book, and can they find you on Twitter and Facebook?
Yeah, they can. I'm not on Facebook. Well, my son has a Facebook page that involves the site, and I can't even tell you what it is. Okay. To be honest with you, but I am on Twitter. I do have a blog. Twitter is just Steve Wells, SAB, and the blog is dwindling in unbelief. And of course, the website is skepticsannotatedbible.com, and that's where you can find, that's where you can find information on buying the book, or you can go to Amazon and find it there.
Great. Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. Again, our guest was Steve Wells, and the book, Drunk with Blood, God's Killings in the Bible, is out. I got mine on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon or through the website skepticsannotedbible.com, and you also grab the book form of the SAB there as well, and I'd highly recommend it to add to your library. You can find me on Twitter under the AxPx, and of course you can find the show on Facebook, facebook.com/the AxPx.
Before we go, what does AxPx stand for?
Oh, armchair philosopher. I wanted to start something up, but I have nothing, I got no training. I'm just a guy, trying to take a swing at philosophy and religion. And so I wrote out, the armchair philosopher. That's exactly what I am. And then, there's actually a band called MXPX, and they used to be called Magnified Plab, but I guess they transferred down to MXPX, and it was just kind of a funny thing. I was like, well, I'm going to call mine the AxPx because that's kind of catchy. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. No problem. And Joey, where can people find you, sir?
Yeah. Twitter, Joey Avalos, Joey, and then my last name, Avalos.
All right. I'm not exactly sure what subject we'll be tackling next week. I like to keep all of you on your toes, but just know we are working on interviews with Jay Baker. We're working on an interview with Mike Herrera, which actually not interview because I listened to his recent podcast and he said he hates interviews. So conversation with Mike Herrera about his band MXPX and kind of hopefully, how they straddled the line between being a Christian band, but also being a, quote unquote, being pretty well off in the secular arena. So that should be a fun conversation. And I know we're going to be talking about the movie The Master. Actually, I think that's what we're going to do next week, possibly. Is we're going to talk about the new movie The Master with a friend and movie critic, Trevor Schoenfeld. And then we also have an evolution podcast in the works. So lots of good stuff coming up throughout the next month. So stay tuned for that. Go to theaxpx.com to look at articles and find the podcast and book reviews there. But find them out, conversate with us on Facebook. I think it's the best place to actually go back and forth and converse. So thank all of you for listening. I want to thank again Steve Wells for talking to us today. I'm Sean DeRager along with Joey Avalos. Have a great week.